When I was growing up here in Salt Lake City, my family's nickname for me was I don't know why, was the absent-minded professor. And in a couple weeks I'll be 64, and I taught a class last winter for OSHER, and after watching the main address, I thought, well, I am an absent-minded professor, so I have finally arrived. It's my pleasure to be here to teach another couple semesters at OSHER, again on the subject of Abraham Lincoln. I'd like to begin by reading something to you. During a dark period of the Civil War, a prominent politician came to Washington to obtain the assistance of Abraham Lincoln for some purpose. He brought with him a great deal of evidence to prove that he was the man who had masterminded the nomination of Lincoln and therefore his election to the presidency. This man came up to Lincoln at the entrance to the White House and walked with him over to the War Department. When Lincoln went into the War Department, the man waited patiently for him, and when Lincoln emerged, he walked back to the White House with him. You could do that back then with the President of the United States. He walked back to the White House with him, citing further facts and arguments about his role in securing the presidency for Lincoln. At the door, the president turned, and with that smile which was half sadness and half fun, he said, "So, you think you made me president?" "Yes, sir, Mr. President, under Providence, I think I did." "Well," said Lincoln, "it's a pretty mess you've gotten me into. But I forgive you." I spent a lot of time in the last couple of years with Mr. Lincoln. He's almost become kind of a member of our family. He's a fascinating character. Last winter I was privileged to teach a course about Lincoln to OSHER, and I concentrated on his oratory, on his great addresses. In studying Lincoln, one of the things I've learned is that actually, for the greatest orator and the greatest speaker to ever occupy the presidency, Lincoln actually gave relatively few speeches and public addresses. There was a time when the State of the Union address was sent up in written form and was read by a clerk. This is an interesting thing when we live in a time where we can't hardly get rid of our presidents talking to us all the time. So I thought, well, when I do it this time around, we're going to talk more about Lincoln doing his job every day. We're going to kind of like get him to stand up from his seat in the Lincoln Memorial and come down from Mount Rushmore and talk about Lincoln, the commander-in-chief, Lincoln, the chief executive. We're going to do two semesters, fall and winter, on this different aspect of Lincoln. What did Lincoln do most of the time? Well, most of the time he went to meetings. He sat at his desk and worked. He wrote letters. He received letters. He went to cabinet meetings. He worked in an office where literally every day there would be a couple hundred people waiting outside to talk to him. He called those his public opinion baths, and he valued them. So we're going to study what Lincoln did as a real leader, leading the country through the Civil War. And we're going to do it by concentrating on certain important issues that he grappled with. For example, the strategy and the waging of the war itself, coming up with the war aims of the Union, the border states, the great issue of emancipation. It's interesting, it's a remarkable thing of history that this man, whose total prior career had consisted, in the military sense, consisted of being a captain of a militia unit to which he was elected by his friends and neighbors in something called the Black Hawk War, which lasted a few months. It was interesting. They never fought any battles. In fact, they never saw any Indians, which they were probably glad for. His total executive experience had been that of managing a two-man law firm in Springfield, Illinois. So what So what was it that made Abraham Lincoln Abraham Lincoln? It's interesting to compare him to his immediate predecessor, James Buchanan, who may have been the worst president in the history of the country, although he's had a lot of competition for that ever since. Buchanan was a congressman, a senator, a minister to Russia, ambassador to the court of St. James, and Secretary of State before he became president. We could also look at Lincoln's opposite number, Jefferson Davis. Graduated from West Point, command of a regiment in the Mexican War, Secretary of War, senator. And yet Lincoln came to tower over both of them. Why is that? One historian wrote, "A Buchanan or Davis would seem to be prepared for leadership by holding a string of high offices, and would yet end up being no wiser than when they had begun. Lincoln could be prepared by traveling in just one Illinois judicial district and one Illinois congressional district, but thinking and thinking and learning and learning." This is a man who, despite his limited executive and military background, his secretary, John Hay, would write about him in 1863. Lincoln's secretaries had nicknames for everybody. The secretary wrote, "The tycoon is in fine whack. I have rarely seen him more serene and busy. He is managing this war, the draft, foreign relations, and planning a reconstruction of the Union, all at once. I never knew with what authority he rules the cabinet, till now. The most important things he decides, and there is no argument." Lincoln had certain qualities. He had the continuous ability to learn and grow. He combined compassion with resolution and the willingness to employ relentless force with great mercy. He had high ideals and clear vision. Mostly he had a sense of what America should be. Not the America as it was before the war, but the America that could emerge from the war. He wrote, in closing, he wrote, "Fellow citizens, we cannot escape history. We will be remembered in spite of ourselves. The fiery trial through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. We say we are for the Union. We know how to save the Union. We here hold the power. In giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free. We shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth." Thank you.